Hi guys, unfortunately I think the internet dropped us out and we missed, I'm not quite sure how much. Hopefully we didn't miss too much. Hopefully people will be able to see what's happening now. Fingers crossed, take 2 is going to behave a little better. All right, so we'll just pick up where we left. Just tilt you down again. See that? Just get that lamp in there. Great, so with the V-tool here, I've carved a series of archways with a running cut. I used a mallet here to knock those in. And then once I had my 2 full arches and 2 half arches carved in, I then used a number 5, 12 feel. So I explained earlier, 5 refers to that sweep and 12 is it's just 12 millimeters wide. Now the 5s are one of my favorite size sweeps. I have them in quite a few sizes. I just think they're really great for a lot of applications, a lot of waste removal, and you can get a fair bit of detail with them as well. And I just came through and used a slicing cut, rotating through around my edges here. Like so, just in my little background notches of my arches there. Now, this is where we're really going to start having some detail come through, and it gets quite exciting now. I'm using something quite large today. It's number 7, 18 Field Gouge. So the number 7, again, referring to that sweep. And because it's a higher number, it's more curved than the number 5. Now, the great thing about these old style patterns is everything just you just work with what you've got. If you have a smaller size tool, instead of putting it here, I'm lining up with my bottom of my pattern and my center line through that archway. If I have something smaller, I just come in like that. So I'm just going to put that there like so. Now this is back to our stop cuts. Give it a tap. There we go. Now, great thing about doing pattern work is you can just move your whole way along your line and you can really get a nice rhythm going. Now come around and do my other side. Just my series of stop cuts here. Now I'm going to use a wedge cut, using the double-handed grip here, coming in and just butting up to that stop cut. And then for the other side, I'm now going to use my left hand as my power hand. And notch these in like this. Now, something I will show you about when you're wedging into a stop cut, we'll just do a little demo up here. So that's a good stop cut. You probably heard how many times I hit it. It's nice and deep. When I come in, that is a nice clean cut. I've got no dags in there. And that is because the stop cut is at least as deep as the bottom of my wedge there, if not deeper. Now I'll show you what happens if I do a shallow stop cut. So it's a real shallow stop cut and I try and come in with a deep wedge. First of all, it's not breaking out. I'm going to have to rip it. You can see all that daggy area I get in there. The important thing with that is you see a lot of beginners, they'll try and sort of wedge that out like that. Don't do that. Come back to your first cut. So come back to your stop cut. Give it a tap, and now I've just cut those bits off. So that's really important. Make sure your stop cuts are deep enough. So now I've just got this little detail happening here. I've always thought of these sort of funny little leaf-shaped things. I'm going to twist my tool around the other way. Do a series of stops along like this. Now I'm going from that center line to the outside of my arch. If my arches were out further, I would just twist the tool around more. That is something that's really great about these older style patterns. You don't need a full repertoire of tools. So far you'll see we're carving this whole thing just with 3 tools, and actually we could have not even used number 512. I could have done it all with just the edge of this one. I'm just notching into these bits here. And now just for, oh, forgot this little guy here. That's no good. Now I'm just going to add a little more detail up the top. Now, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments, and hopefully at the end I'll be able to flip the screen up and answer them to you properly. So that's a series of stop cuts, and now I'm just doing a little wedge into those. So I've just got my series of wedge cuts. Now, if you're anything like me, you're thinking it's probably a little empty up the top here. So you guessed it, just another series of stop cuts and wedge cuts. Now, when you do this pattern, you'll look at it and overall it might look complicated, but hopefully I've been able to show you today just how you can break it down a little easier. And really, it's just our same 4 basic cuts. They're actually at the beginning of the other video because the internet cut out. So hopefully next time we can resolve that issue. Stop cut, wedge cut. Now this sort of thing will look great around, you know, the border of a box. You could really blow it up so your circles were very wide and do it as a decorative panel. You know, there's all sorts of possibilities with it. So now I've just got these wedges in here. I always like this part. It's just a bit of fun. In old carving, they often use decorative punches quite a lot. Here I have just an old screwdriver. Bill's head there that I've cut off to make a little decorative punch. And as you can see, a little star there. So we just pop that around. There we have our little pattern. I'll just unclamp this to show you, and then I'll show you one other quick little decorative technique that works really well. So you can see there, we're really starting to create, somebody who didn't know, they might think that was a complicated pattern there. We've got arches dipping behind one another. But given that you've seen the whole video, you can see it's just, we've just got running cut, stop cut, and wedge cuts coming into them. And you can imagine that, you know, wrapping around a jewelry box, the edge of a coffee table even. The first time I did this pattern, I did it out of an oak, so it was quite a different game. I was using a much larger V tool. I was using something like this instead. And every cut was having to be worked quite hard with the mallet. Now I'll just show you one other very simple little decorative trim you can do. I've personally been wanting to carve little cheese boards and add these onto them for quite a while. I just haven't got around to it. So for this pattern, it works quite well if you have something quite rounded. So this is a Field Gouge again. You'll notice it's pretty much all I use. Number 9. So that sweep is a number 9. So you can see it's getting quite round there. And number 10 millimeters wide. If you had a number 8 sweep, 12 millimeters wide, you would get exactly the same results. Not exactly the same, but you don't have to get too pedantic about it. So this is just going to give you a little trim. I'm going to just do a series of stop cuts. Now you could, if you want to do a really neat job, actually measure these out. So the first row I've done bevel facing back. Now I'm going to twist that tool and just come along on the other side of that. And I'm joining up with that first row. Okay, so you can see I've got an S pattern formed here. Now, the really important part when you do your wedge cuts for this, so remember a wedge cut is just a cut down in like that, works best into a stop cut. If I start at this end of my pattern and do a wedge, I'll show you, like that. No, I didn't do my stop cut deep enough there. Then my next wedge cut is going to be putting pressure on this here, on this very, very fine piece of timber here. Whereas if I start at the far right-hand side for me, for this top row, do my wedge cut in there, I am always pushing into as much timber as possible. Let's clean that one up a bit. So again, when I come from the other side, I can't start up this end because again, I'm going to be, if I remove this like that, I'm now butting into really weak, small amount of timber. Whereas if I start up this end like this, well, now I'm just going to apply a slight slicing cut to that. So if you watch the first video of the day, you'll know what that's about. So this is a really sweet little trim you can apply to all sorts of projects. You can see it's very simple, but it looks a little more fancy than you and I know it is. Isn't that great? Now, if anybody has any questions, tilt this up, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, if I don't see any soon, I'll end up going. All right, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. I hope the internet, oh, I've got one. Okay, yep. So the wood here that I'm using today is jelly tong. Jelly tong is a fantastic wood for carving. You can probably see that it does not have much grain direction going on at all. The grain is running like this, but it's not going to prove much of a problem. It's very soft, reasonably strong. This here, tiny little black bit, That's actually the knots you get in jelly tongs. So they're not your traditional, you know, circles largening out like that. Instead, you just get a hollow little tube running through your timber, and it's really easy to avoid. Next question. What is the best timber for general carving? Thanks for your question, Cynthia. It really depends on what you want to carve. I know that's not a very helpful question. Answer, sorry, it's a very helpful question. It really depends what you want to carve. I've carved quite a lot out of jelly tong because it takes detail quite well and behaves really nicely. I often start beginners off on it in my classes because it is nice and easy. Grain direction can be a bit of a thing for people to get their heads around, and you don't really have to spend too much thought trying to understand that whilst you're learning the cutting techniques with jelly tong. But some other great carving timbers, there's everything really. I've used oak a fair bit as well. It works great for this sort of patterning there. Oak, and you just have to use a lot more strength in your mallet control. I've used walnut a fair bit. Anything that is tight grained is generally better off. Don't be deterred by the fact that something is a hardwood as well. I've had some bits of blackwood that have carved like absolute butter and been beautiful, and some that have been really awful. I recently carved a heron bird out of golden wattle as well. So there are some, contrary to popular belief, there are some Australian timbers that carve really, really nicely as well. You just don't find them on the racks as much at the timber shop. And when are classes available? Thanks, Hayden. Well, with COVID, I'm not really sure at the moment. I've had to cancel my classes for this year. I'm hoping next year we'll just bounce straight back into it and have a lot of classes running then. Another question. Is the timber I'm using readily available? It is and it isn't, if that makes sense. If you go to a timber store, I got this from Matthews in Melbourne. A proper timber supply store, yes, it will be. If you go to a construction timber store, like a hardware store, then no, it won't be. Any other questions coming through from anybody? Nope. Doesn't look like it. Well, thank you so much for joining, everybody. I'm really sorry about the break we had in our videos with the internet there. I hope you're all able to jump across easily enough, and I hope it wasn't too disrupting. I have no idea how long I kept talking at the computer screen whilst it wasn't live streaming, so that will be fun for me to find out later. Thank you very much, Simone. Awesome. So next month, hopefully I'll see you all again, and we will be discussing grain direction. That really plays a part in the direction in which you can carve and the types of cuts you can do and get out of your timber. So we'll be looking at timber choice a bit more and grain direction. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next month. Oh, sorry, one other thing. If anybody wants to see any examples of my work, you can hop onto my website, www.oliviaoconnor.com.au, or you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. Just search Olivia O'Connor Carving. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.